Matthew used the word in the 8th chapter to describe the storm on the Sea of Galilee. When Jesus rebuked the seismists and the waves were still, he rebuked the wind. Aristotle taught that earthquakes were only severe gales blowing through subterranean caverns, making the ground rumble, rattle, and roll. To the first century Jew, to the first century Greek, it was only a question of where is the big wind blowing. The appearance of the angel, not his features, but his idea, his aspect, he looked like, he appeared to be, a brilliant white light, a flash, a glare, a burst of white light, something that's going to light up the entire sky, lightning. At which point the scream was, "Hallelujah, we got it." If you haven't noticed, I haven't told you what produced these images in back of me, and I can't. Up until October of 1981, I'd have said we know. But until 120 of the best names in the world, and I'm not one of them, could sign the paper and give it to the world for free, we're not talking. We did everything imaginable to avoid sensationalism, to keep anyone from making a buck out of it. It didn't work, but we tried. Today I've got to say that after 6 years plus of the most intensive research that science is capable of bringing to bear on anything, we do not know what produced the image on the Shroud of Turin. When we had the symposium in October of '81 at Connecticut College in New London, Yukon at Avery Point, they came from all over the world. 2 teams from Australia, Nippon Television, all over Europe, all over this country. All but 1 team packed up and went back home when they found out that there were not going to be any sensational announcements. This is or is not Jesus. He was or was not resurrected. They were demanding sensationalism. I always felt that what they got was sensational enough. I couldn't believe it the first time I heard it. They were told, and they did very little with it, that the image on the Shroud of Turin is not a forgery. It was not made by human hands. How's that for a statement by modern science? It was not made by human hands. It is not possible for modern science to duplicate it. We know how to put a team on the moon, and we can do it again. We don't know how to reproduce this image. It appears to have been produced by something that resulted in the oxidation, dehydration, and the conjugation of the polysaccharide structure of the microfibers of the linen itself. Or there might be 5 honest people in this room. The rest of you chemists already know that that's nothing but scientist double talk, unless you happen to be a chemist, for the fact that the image is a scorch. It's burned down to the topmost fibers of the cloth. But what produced that burn is beyond the capability of modern science to duplicate in the laboratory. And one of the unbreakable laws of science is that no matter what you're looking at, no matter what you believe you have in your hand, unless you can duplicate it in the lab, you're forced to say you don't understand it. You simply don't understand something you can't duplicate. How do you duplicate a one-shot? Something which doesn't seem to have happened before. It certainly hasn't happened since. This is very crude, but it's the best I can do. If you can imagine pulling one hair out of your head, scorch one face of that hair. Do not get the sides, definitely not the bottom. Scorch one face of one hair. You might be able to duplicate one aspect of the problem, but that can't be done. Again, this is crude. If you can imagine an infinite number of laser beams, this is not laser. It is non-isotropic. There's no diffusion. One for every single pore in the body, coming out in a straight line, vertical mapping, scorching an uncountable number of tiny dots, almost like a newspaper picture under magnification, only on the topmost fibers of the cloth. Again, you might be able to duplicate another aspect of the problem. But that type of energy doesn't exist on Earth. There's only some indication of it on a 14-foot-long piece of cloth in Italy. So what happens? It's back to the lab, maybe forever. We're planning to go back to Italy as quickly as possible, as soon as the church will let us have the cloth, if they will. Every question that was answered in 1978 has raised 10 new ones that no one could possibly have conceived of at that time. Every theory that anyone has ever come up with has been tried. Chemistry is 100% done on the cloth. It completely refutes physics. How do you tell someone in school that the laws of physics are no longer immutable? We have something that says they're wrong, and yet they're right. Chemistry, X-ray fluorescence, ultraviolet, infrared totally preclude the possibility of paint having been used on this cloth. There is absolutely nothing on this cloth that could have been used to produce pigment in any form whatsoever, despite what you might have read in some of the newspapers. They overkilled the point. They had to refute a book which shouldn't have been written. They certainly overkilled it. It is not a painting. The Rolling Stones had a theory. It was tried. They published it. It was tried. It didn't work. I've spoken on many campuses. You tell the kids in school that their theory is as good as someone else's, and boy, you get theories. Every so often you hear a new one. Call a lab, ask them to try it. Nothing worked. What I'm saying is that nobody was rejected based on how old they were or who they were. One theory is as good as another, yet nothing worked. Up until October of 1981, there was only one theory that almost everybody could buy. It was a statement made in one of the world's biggest laboratories. The image on the Shroud of Turin could only have been produced by what may turn out, ultimately, to have been the greatest burst of radiant energy ever known to man, possibly exceeding even that of a nuclear bomb, emanating uniformly from every pore of the man's body, from the inside out, in a millisecond of time. I once timed a strobe light at an airport at 9 times a second. This would have been 1,000. In a thousandth of a second or less, producing a temperature that one man estimated had to have been in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Enough in a millisecond to scorch the cloth, but not destroy it. Undoubtedly, this would be the experience the Christians normally call the resurrection. Bong. Except I've got to say, how do you duplicate the resurrection in the laboratory? That's our problem. Now, I got no way to prove why. I stick my neck out every time I say it. I'm some kind of a biblical fundamentalist. I don't know what kind. I haven't figured that out yet. But I'm some kind. Primarily because science has yet to disprove even one story in the Bible. It looks as if there's evidence that maybe there was a man and a woman named Adam and Eve. Maybe. There's a boat on top of a mountain in the desert. We know what the mechanics of the flood were all about. The Bible even seems to talk about the point in time when the continental drift began, and it looks as if a couple of men, one from the University of Pennsylvania, the other either Illinois or Indiana, have just uncovered Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain. And we can even tell you how a woman could, or a man, could conceivably be turned into something that resembles a pillar of salt in only one spot on Earth that anyone knows of where the conditions are geologically correct. And because those stories appear to have been at least tied down pretty good, I can buy the rest of them, the ones we can't prove. Because of that, I'm not hanging anything on anybody, but I'm only saying where I'm coming from, and I wish I could explain them to you. But because of that, because that's the way I think, I've had to look at every theory that anyone has ever come up with for the image-producing mechanism on the Shroud of Turin with those eyes. Because if anything were to contradict that story I've told you this evening, this isn't Jesus. I have my biblio with me. About every fourth word is nailed down. It's withstood a great deal of scrutiny. What you've heard tonight is historical fact. If anything were to have contradicted it, I'd never believe that this was Jesus. Even if it did, I'd want to be part of it. There's one Jewish genius traveling the world with a set of slides and a light pointer saying, what's a good Jewish boy like me doing working on a Catholic relic? My family tells me I'm crazy. I tell them you find me a better game and you can deal me in. In the meantime, I'm going to play in this one. Me too. It's the best game in town. But nothing has contradicted it. And it's too late for it to happen now. But only one theory fits in. And no, we cannot prove it. We may never prove it. But suppose someday, and it's happened in the past, every telephone in the United States and England all go off at the same time. Some lab is screaming, you won't believe what we just found. Nope, never do. You just check it. Suppose this time we've got the frequency. Now we can talk about it. Radiant energy. It doesn't have to be thermonuclear. Those lights are radiant energy. If you don't believe it, come up here and stand with me. So is sunlight, X-ray. But almost every single time when it occurs in a burst, it's accompanied by a brilliant white light, a flash, a glare, a burst of white light, something that's going to light up the entire sky. With or without a mushroom cloud, with or without sound, that white light is there just about every time. And sure, I believe in angels. I can tell you angel stories from now until tomorrow afternoon. I know too many people who have seen them and talked to them. And these kids wouldn't dare lie. They're scared. I've been present when they were. As I said, I've got loads of stories. I just don't believe that at that hour before dawn, before the Jewish women showed up, and incidentally, the Bible does say that 4 writers that tell us that the women saw angels. I don't believe that at that hour before the Jewish women showed up that the Romans saw an angel. I think that what they saw was the mechanics, the cause and effect of the resurrection, how the Father went about raising his Son, and they did not have the vocabulary with which to describe it.